inside everything.
Corey's ready.
He's
So
just rolling.
now it's your show.
Here we go. Ready? This is a lot nicer than where I usually record. All right. Welcome back to another episode of The Strategy Inside Everything. I am here with Mr. Rob Schwartz, who is the CEO of TBWA NY. That's a big title, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Great to be here on the pod to pod back to back podcast experience.
We're actually in the Disruptor Series podcast studio here at TBWA. So, or at Hub, the Hub.
Yeah, it's actually a division of Omnicom.
Yeah. So here we are. We just did the Disruptor Series, and I was on the hot seat. I mean, literally, Rob had me sweating, and now I've got him on the hot seat. So we're turning this thing around. I wanted to talk to you today. I think I reached out to you 3 or 4 months ago, and I didn't know that you had changed your role. So for people who don't know Mr. Schwartz, give them a little bit of your background, because you came up as a creative, you were a writer.
Yep.
You pretty much did it all through. Were you always? I know you're at Hill Holiday, but Shy at Day mostly, yeah.
Yeah, mostly, yeah. I started as a copywriter right here in the fine city of New York, at a tiny little boutique agency called Altschiller Reitzfeld.
Oh yeah.
Good little agency. Then I went out to Hill Holiday. Came with the riots back in 1992. And from there I went to Team One, worked on Lexus. I did a quick stint up in San Francisco and then back down to L.A. And I got ultimately hired at TBWA Shy Day in Los Angeles. And worked my way up from creative director up through to chief creative officer of our L.A. office. Then I had a global role. I did a couple of interesting global things. And then in July of 2014, I had a meeting with our new CEO at the time of the network, Troy Ruhanen. And he said, "What do you want to do next?" And I said, I don't really know, and blah-de-blah. He said, "Well, why don't you think about being the CEO of New York?"
What did you think about that? Were you prepared for that idea?
No.
Had that crossed your mind?
No. I think, as a creative, you're in your bubble and you're obsessing over whatever it is you're working on.
Right.
I mean, you're very tree, not very forest.
Were you still writing, or were you more oversight of the work and global focus, leading major client relationships at a global level?
I mean, both. I think the interesting thing about both the TBWA culture and the Shy Day culture, and then when they wrapped together, was that it's kind of a blue collar agency for creatives. I mean, even as a creative director, you're still making stuff, and I don't mean like you're in the way of your teams. It's just that you are, as they say, nature abhors a vacuum. Whenever there's a vacuum, we were in there trying to make something happen.
So you were still working and involved in the work. You didn't have that cushy CCO job.
No, I don't know what that cushy job is. All I know is that we had the McDonald's business globally.
Yep.
There were plenty of opportunities. And of course, the flip side of the word opportunity in the Chinese character is crisis.
No.
You didn't know that? This is a great thing. It's an old,
I think
JFK used that back in the day during
the
Cuban Missile Crisis. That, for the Chinese character that shows you crisis is the same character you use for opportunity.
Oh, that's so funny.
So there were a lot of opportunities at the time. And I just walked into the fire. That's what I was doing at that time. But when Troy said, think about New York, I said, give me a week. And I put together a business plan, which, like a creative guy business plan, which is how do we position the thing.
Well,
and then I started as the CEO of New York in January of 2015.
Okay. So, you've had a good run now.
Yeah, it's been almost 3.5 years.
So how are you seeing, when you got a brief and you were a writer, or when you were chief creative officer and you were seeing a campaign or an idea and you were trying to mold that thing or help push it along, you had one approach to solving those problems or to leading those battles. How is that? What are some of the similarities and differences that you see as a CEO? Because the problems are a lot different, I would imagine, or tell me if I'm incorrect about that.
Well, I think the biggest difference is, as a CEO, you try to look at things from 10,000 feet. As A chief creative officer, you sort of look at things from 3,000 feet.
Yeah.
And as a creative, you look at things 3 feet in front of you.
Right. Or less.
Yeah, or
Depending on how much zoom you have in your Photoshop.
Or less. Maybe it's 3 inches. So that, purview as a CEO gives you a sense of you start to look at briefs as, okay, what's driving the brief on the client side? We're at this conference room table, but what conference room table led to this thing? I mean, you start to think about all the holistic pieces that went into the brief, what's driving the business,
right?
What are the market opportunities? And then by the same token, you also start to think about immediately, okay, how can I do this and cast this with the best talent, the most efficient way so we can actually make this profitable?
Right.
And best people is where you stop as a creative director. You could care less.
That's against your training to think about the next part.
Yeah, I mean the way it materializes, you don't think about.
Right. And you can't.
Yeah. And I don't know. I have this interesting theory about creative careers.
Tell me.
It's the Beatles theory of creative careers. So you start your creative career and you're John Lennon. You want to light the world on fire. You could care less, what damage you do on the way up, but you're going to be famous and do something.
You're going to be the one.
That's loved. Exactly. Then you get a little taste of that and you move up the food chain and you become Paul. You're like, I'm going to light up the world. I'm going to do really famous things. But maybe some people can actually not find me so abrasive. I can be kind of affable and likable.
Take the edges off.
Yeah, exactly. But still very famous. Then you go on through your career and you become George. Because at that point, you're like, you know what? I'm just as good as these guys, but I don't need them. I can do this myself. I want to break away and I'm going to do my own thing.
And I don't have to throw my elbows to prove it.
Exactly. I'm just going to do this by myself. Then you start doing it by yourself. And again, you can have wild success by yourself, but you're lonely. And then you become Ringo.
Oh, God.
And you're like, you know what? I just want to hang with the band. I'm going to do my fills here, but we're going to do some famous stuff.
When Paul lets you.
Right.
Do you know I'm a drummer? And as a former creative, that really makes me sad because I think I was Ringo more than I was Paul or John for sure.
It happens. We're going to come to Ringo in a second. But that's at the end.
Yeah.
At a certain point, and again, you could stay Ringo and be very happy, but there is one other rung. There's one other place to go, and that is the place of enterprise. Who conceives the whole thing? Who can say, wow, these 4 guys are really talented. They can light up the world. I not only want to make them light up the world, I actually want to help them do it in the best way possible and clean them up and teach them stagecraft. And then you become Brian Epstein.
Yeah.
And those are kind of the 5 stages of a creative career. Now, you don't have to be Brian Epstein, but I actually saw that, wow, I not only loved, being a Beatle, as it were. I was really not as good as any Beatle. But however, metaphorically, I loved being a Beatle. And then I saw an opportunity to actually be the leader of the Beatles, the visionary behind the Beatles.
And so you had that vision. You had that view of assembling teams and putting people together and helping from a management level make sense of the chaos of a creative team.
Yeah, I'd read a bit of it just organically. I love, music and I read a lot about it, listen to a ton of it. But when Troy said, hey, think about being the CEO of New York,
yeah.
I immediately went through Beatles books. I went through Andrew Loog Oldham, who was the manager of the Rolling Stones. Like I read, his book again, just about how, again, he assembled, these guys and had a vision for them. I read Berry Gordy's book on Motown because these were people.
That's where's your gut to go to those books.
Yeah, because these were people who took creative people and enterprises that were built to produce a creative product that was populist and popular. And I was looking for blueprints within that.
Yeah. Were you able to draw anything, or were you just kind of seeing similarities in their stories or just looking for ideas somewhere in there?
Yeah, I mean, I saw a ton. Certainly with Brian Epstein, one of the big lessons from him was, introduce in his case, instruments and arrangements to the band, but let the band be the band. And kind of a great lesson in influencing and light touching as well, which again is great for a creative business. Andrew Loog Oldham, I think, was different in that he looked at the Stones, and his lesson was about positioning.
Yeah.
He's like, if the Beatles are going to be the folks you can bring home to your parents, we're going to position the Stones as someone that would be frightening to the parents, and you wouldn't let your daughter date one of them.
Right. Something to push back against.
Yeah. It was a positioning exercise. It was very clear to me. And then with Berry Gordy, what was very powerful about Motown, and I loved his story because again, he was a practitioner, and then he became the leader of it, the manager of it all, the CEO of Motown. His whole thing was on systematization, on making it a factory. He worked in the Mercury car factory back when Ford had Mercury, and he loved the manufacturing piece of that job. He was mesmerized by it, and he said, "Hey, can I manufacture pop culture?"
The assembly line.
Yeah, in the same way, put together the pieces to do that. So those three, I think, were really good archetypes.
I want to dig in on positioning because the example you have is the Rolling Stones positioning against the Beatles. So there's 2. The British Invasion had 10.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You, as the incoming CEO of TBWA, had how many agencies are you competing against that you have to position yourself against? How did you wade through that? I mean,
yeah, well,
there's no Beatles that you could just go, oh, okay, they're the Golden Boys, we're going to do this and be the bad boys. There's so much more to it than that.
Well, I used disruption. I mean, that's where the methodology that we live by really came through. So I looked at the convention, I looked at what the vision could be, and then I created a positioning through the disruption. So New York had been inconsistent. The New York agency. Jay Scheid only wanted a great New York office at one point. He just like that. He loved L.A. He built L.A. It was incredible in L.A. But he was a New Yorker. He's like, oh my God, I have to do something.
He wanted to have something there.
My mom would appreciate it. He was from New Jersey, but New York, New Jersey, the tri-state area Scheids. He really wanted to make that happen, and Scheid Day in the early '90s was remarkable. Scheid Day, 2008, the most awarded agency in the world. But there were troughs between them, various degrees. The office originally opened in 1982. It didn't light it up for almost 10 years. Then it was at a peak, then a valley, so it was always up and down. So part of it was positioning the convention as an inconsistently mezzo agency. And it wasn't great. The vision at the time was, I said, well, let's just be the best example of strategy and creative for the TBWA network. So let's just be that. If we can just be that,
that'd be pretty good.
We could probably be pretty good and compete with the rest of the market. So that was the convention, that was the vision, and the disruption was at the same time, being inspired by all these music books. I was reading a lot about startups and the lean startup, and I thought, well, maybe instead of being this kind of legacy Madison Avenue agency, what if we were a startup? What if we really said, hey, we're just opening up a new office now?
Just like a day one thing.
A day one thing. And, oh, by the way, we're semi-well funded because we're part of a global enterprise. And I wrote the original strategy statement as startup hustle, global muscle. Mm-hmm. And then we switched it to make it ready for prime time, which was the positioning of the agency today, which is New York hustle, global muscle.
Right.
And I think one other thing I would throw in there is that as a New Yorker, I grew up in New York. I knew Scheid Day as a New York agency. I mean, of course, I knew it as a brilliant California agency as I got older. But I knew the New Yorkness of it. And when I got to the agency, I didn't feel New York. And I said, this has to feel like a very New York company.
It did have more of the L.A. kind of culture vibe, or did it just have a neutral vibe?
No, it actually needed the LA energy and optimism.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's what I imported because I lived that. I knew the power of that. But it needed more New Yorkers. There just weren't enough New Yorkers in the company. And
to ground it? Or?
Yeah, and I think the spirit of it. Because I think when you think about the way New Yorkers are, there's a sense when you're out west in Scottsdale that there is a part of you, I'm sure on a daily basis, that is still very New York. And there's a sense...
People love it.
Well, and I think for an agency, when you think about traits of New York, I mean, there's an ambition and there's an impatience.
Yeah, 100%.
And there's an acceptance of kind of natural diversity. You're used to being in a melting pot.
Yes.
And I think those three factors are really powerful in our business: ambition, diversity, and impatience.
And real diversity where your actually ears and brain are open to hearing the input of people that are not you. Or
100%.
Not lookalikes of you. That's where I think in those smaller markets, and you see this in pop culture, it's like there's just areas where there isn't that diversity. You don't know what you're missing until you don't have it.
Without question.
It's amazing.
And that kind of subway experience, subway casting, if you will, has made for a pretty interesting agency.
How did you reconcile the CCO who stopped thinking put together the best team that's going to produce the best work, and the CEO that now does have to write the check or at least account for it or explain to somebody? Like, how did you get over that hurdle? Because I would imagine it's mentally, you've trained yourself for 20 years to say, I'm cost be damned.
Right.
We're going to do the best work for that client and we're going to win every award known to man. Like, how did you get yourself, or what's your approach to it, I guess?
I mean, it's a great question, and it's not an easy thing to, as you say, to reconcile. I heard one thing growing up through the business that was very powerful to me. I was really fortunate when Carlos Ghosn took over Nissan as the CEO. He was known as the cost cutter, the cost cutter. But he was actually what I used to call the magician, because he told this to me. He said, I'm using cost cutting. I'm saving the money so I can invest in creative people. And when you look at his tenure as the CEO of Nissan, there was quite a bit of cost cutting, but there was an incredible and an inordinate amount of investment in R&D and creative and design. And I started to reconcile it, because I think that's the right word for this, which is when we save the money, we can invest the money.
Right.
And when we save the money on dumb stuff, we can invest it in smart stuff like, creative people and experimenting. Yeah,
and get people in that can actually transform the business.
Yeah.
In his case, cars. But in your case, advertising hasn't changed that much. You need the new brains. You need brains of people that are going to come in that you can invest in, that can adapt to how fast it is changing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's knowing that. I think that really helped.
What is the biggest thing you've come up against, or what's an aha that was just you had no expectation of having to deal with it, or just something totally foreign? When we were just talking before, you said as a copywriter, you never were there when the strategy was a blank page. As the CEO, what were you surprised about? I'm sure there were a lot of little ones, but what was a big one?
I think one of the things that's very surprising as a CEO, and one of the things that I really love, is that you are CEO of your agency and you are a consigliere to your clients. You are therapist, you are a friend, you are a person just on the other side of a table listening. And what I have loved about this job too is really getting to know clients and understand them and help them.
Yeah.
And sometimes helping them is just, hey, maybe you should think about trying this with your CEO, or maybe you should think about this with here's some feedback on your team, and maybe this can help. And, clients don't have all the answers. And I think as a creative, you sit there and you're like, well, this client, surely what we present to them, they're going to know exactly how to get this through their organization.
No, they never know.
Yeah, it's
totally
very hard for them too. So I think that I guess I've really developed an empathy gene that I didn't know I had.
You didn't have that as a creative?
I think I had a sensitivity to whoever the audience was. I was very audience aware. The radar was always up. I just being always obsessed with what's the audience going to think of this thing.
You were able to jump that level, and now your audience is really the client that is sitting lamenting.
I think I think I have the same obsession with the audience, but now the client piece is, it's kind of their total plight. It's not just, I want them to approve this creative. I mean, of course that's important, but I also want I get quite I don't know, I wouldn't call it passionate because it sounds weird, but I'm interested in their success. I want their success, and their success is not only advertising; it's them being successful, throughout their professional life.
Well, that's a carryover from CCO, where you're really helping the creative team to deliver the best thing. Then your name is on the work, but really they get famous from the work they've done.
Yeah.
Same thing as a client. You want the client now to be successful and to get whatever it is, whatever the end goal is for them. Yeah. Right? So it's kind of the same. Yeah. In that way, it's a similar job.
Yeah. I think when you put it in that context, yeah.
How do you lead? How do you handle the planning? I mean, fiscal planning and the shape of that is just so much different in my mind than kind of creative department planning. Is that overwhelming, or do you just have a great support staff that kind of welcomed you and you figured it out together? Well,
I won't lie. It was overwhelming at first. I mean, I think one of the things about finances that I've learned, because I wasn't a finance major, and like everybody else, I got into advertising, so I didn't have to do math.
Amen.
What I learned though is that financing, the finance piece is like learning another language. So you have to, I used to just think, well, why can't we just say it's money? Well, there's a difference between what's capital. There's a difference between revenue. Like the precision of the language of money, I found kind of electrifying as a writer. And I know it seems like, well, knucklehead, didn't you know that before? No, because I wasn't paying attention to that. So I think one of the first big lessons, if you're going to make this transition from creative to management and leadership, is you have to appreciate that it's a new language. The other part of it is that it's a combination of reporting and planning. And a big task of what we're tasked with is reporting the activity of a quarter. It's kind of what's killing America in a way, killing the world. That we have to constantly report to Wall Street.
Right.
You don't have time to work because you're too busy reporting.
Right, and you better show growth.
Exactly.
At all costs, right?
Exactly. But this sort of forensic reporting is something you have to get comfortable with, and then once you know where you stand, because that's what that 6+6 finance meeting, that 3+9 finance meeting, as they're known, by the months in and the months left. That's where you stand. I know where I stand, and then you can do the planning.
You can adapt and build a plan based on where you are.
Yeah.
Interesting. And as coming from the creative side again, how about management? People management, because you're helping the heads of all the departments, and that's a lot of different types of skills and a lot of different type of people who are managing people with even more complex, sets of jobs. I don't know all the disciplines you have here, but I'd imagine there's a few. Yeah. How have you adapted to that?
Well, I think the people management part, I'll take a page from your book. There's a certain underthinking, a certain simplicity that I like to apply to it, and it's really about kind of IQ and EQ. The IQ is the skills, understanding what these people do, so you can understand their plight a bit, and the EQ, which is really kind of listening to what the issues are and what the problems are. So together you can solve them. I can't have every answer.
But just simplifying it down to just listening to whoever it is and just trying to figure out what they really want as a form of help.
Yeah, and listen, most times, and I'm as guilty as anybody, you don't really know what you want. And the conversations you can have can oftentimes get to, that's the thing you really want.
Right. And they come in and they don't even know.
Yeah, I mean,
when they sit down, it's subconscious.
Sometimes they do. I mean, but oftentimes people have they have an immediate problem. But as you've observed as a planner, your immediate problem might not be the root problem. And I think talking and making the time to talk to people and listening, that is half the battle.
Yeah. All right, last question. I know you're a very busy gentleman. Talk to me about planning in your organization. Now, I know Jay Shia was a founder.
Yep.
So I would imagine planning is kind of held in a high regard here.
Yep.
How have you embraced it, and how is it growing and flourishing here?
Yeah. Well, Shia Day was the first American company to bring in planning.
That's
with Jane Newman. And TBWA, was founded, the T, the B, the W, and the A. The B, Claude Benage, was a planner.
Right.
And I just had lunch with one of the founders, and he was telling me that what was interesting about TBWA, they were founded in 1970, is that there was no discipline that was overriding the other one. That it was like a Justice League. The four of them came together. So, like you say in your book, the planning is not a destination in and of itself, but there's huge respect for it. And when you then look at the legacy of disruption, then you start to see the power of it. So I guess to answer your question, the first piece is that disruption is at the core of all of our planning.
Right.
And this was, now it's a buzzword, everybody says it, but in 1990 when Jean-Marie Drew hatched it, it was fresh.
Yeah.
And what's become fresh about it now is that it's a methodology. It's a way of getting to ideas. And we have what we call strategic OS, our strategic operating system, which is disruptions at the core, but the three wheels around it are data, brand planning, and content. And when you operate it that way, through a lens of disruption or using disruption as an inspiration, you can build some pretty interesting brands.
Yeah, and you can keep the disruption from being just a buzzword or a concept.
Yeah.
You bring it, it's actionable. It's something that lives.
Yeah. I think because of the framework, and the framework's so intuitive, I used it to position the agency. You know where you want to go in the vision, and you see what the landscape looks like. Not every convention is wrong.
It's a powerful part of our brief as well, what is the overriding category convention? Because if you can tell me what consumers think of the category overwhelmingly, it shows you the path.
Yeah.
Or it shows you a potential path to upsetting that or get around it.
Yeah.
There's only one category leader in every category. Right? So only one agency has the leader. Everybody else is a challenger.
Yeah.
So using that to figure out how to upend them is powerful. So I'm a subscriber to it.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. I think because it's intuitive. That's why it's lasted so long.
Does your strategy and planning team all subscribe to a single? I know you have the strategy OS. Mm-hmm. Do they all kind of subscribe to that, or is it a lot of different mindsets and a lot of different approaches?
We've tried to have every client use disruption. What's interesting is that everyone in the agency uses disruption. Now, not every client may buy into it.
I totally understand.
As expressed.
Right.
But I think every client knows that we arrived at the recommendations using it.
Right. It may not be in the PowerPoint the exact way, but you're using it in all the brands one way or another.
Exactly.
All right, that's all I have for you. I want to let you get back to work. You got a company to run here, sir.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for letting me be on this strategy inside everything.
Yeah, dude. Of course.
And
thanks for making time. You
kidding
me?
Thank you for doing the world's first, at least we think,
I think
pod to pod podcast.
I told you we're going to do podcast magic today. I think we did it.
It's awesome.
All right, thanks a lot, Bob.
You got it. All right, Corey, there you go. That was efficient.
Good?
Yeah. Is it good for you? Is that like what you wanted?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.